Welcome to another episode of Off the Charts. Mike Dake here at ASTEC with its director, Allan Hamilton. You know, Allan, we've been blessed at the University of Arizona Health Sciences to have some phenomenal spaces for teaching and educating our trainees. Obviously, HSIB, a beautiful building, the Sleep Center, world-class, but the crown jewel, at least from my perspective, is ASTEC. And as director of ASTEC, we're going to get into everything that makes ASTEC so special. You should be closer together or tell us?
No,
further apart.
Face each other a little more, I think.
Okay. Allan, before we get to some of the phenomenal programs that ASTEC is offering to our students, I want to talk a little about your career. You've got so many interesting aspects to your career. Some of you, I'm sure not many, but some of you know that Allan is the chief medical consultant for Grey's Anatomy in Hollywood. That's an amazing thing. He was in the armed forces and served at Desert Storm in the Army. But you started out your working career, well, where are you from?
From New York City.
New York City.
Yeah.
But you started out your working career as a janitor.
Yeah.
Give us what happened. How'd you get into medicine? Went to Harvard Medical School and the Mass General for neurosurgical training. But take us that first step from janitor to medical student.
I couldn't find a job. I had trained as an English major. I couldn't find a job. It was a recession. And so there was this ad for a part-time janitor. So I took it and I worked at cleaning this church and I still needed some more money. So I saw another job, which was I could work at cleaning a veterinary hospital. So I cleaning the veterinary hospital and they had the windows looking into the operating room. And I guess I was mopping just a little too much right outside the window. And one of the surgeons took pity on me and said, get your chores done early and you can come in here and hold retractors. And that's when I knew, well, I want to be a surgeon.
It.
Yep.
Fantastic.
I was hooked.
Fantastic. And when you were in the Army and in Desert Storm, was that the start of your interest in simulation, or what really took you from the operating room to the simulation?
So it turns out when I originally was recruited for the Army, they said, we are interested, one of my passions was mountain climbing. So I was interested in high altitude cerebral edema and hypoxia. So these four guys show up one day with, flat brush cuts and black shoes and everything and say, do you mind if we talk to you about a job? And I was a resident and they said, we want to recruit you to work specifically in high altitude research. So I became a flight surgeon and I ran the largest high altitude chamber in the world. And we did tons and tons of simulation. We would simulate tasks in the altitude chamber. If they worked there, then in the summer we'd head to Pikes Peak, 14,320 feet, but who's counting? And then if that worked at Pikes Peak, then it moved over to Alaska, to the area around McKinley. And we would, be camped out there for 7 or 8 weeks.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, now as director of ASTEC, you have one of the foremost simulation centers in not only the country, but the world. Yeah. Tell us about some of the, from your perspective, some of the things you're really excited about in the direction simulation's going. I know we have the traditional simulation. We now have moving into image-guided simulation and looking at how we can bring multiple modalities into simulation. But the most recent thing is obviously AI, and you've got some fantastic projects going. Tell us about some of them.
Well, I think it's a renaissance. I think, you and I grew up in an era where, you saw one, you did one, you taught one, and it was very hard. There was much more patient continuity than there is now. And gradually the fields moved over to, we need to simulate skills, we need to develop interprofessional skills, personal skills, leadership skills, and gradually all of that's moved over into simulation as part of it, particularly interdisciplinary teamwork and that sort of thing. So, we sort of had the perfect storm, which was COVID-19 hit, just as some new engines for, machine learning came along. And these computer guys were just being left alone to work. And so we got some really big transformative engines. And when everybody came back, we had this wonderful access to AI. We had been teaching AI for about 4 years here. But we began to see that the real need was for AI to streamline as much as it could the learning process and free us up to do more of the human side of teaching, if you will. So we began to look at, could we use AI, for example, to teach students how to interview? And it turns out, yes, you can. And AI does a very good job of making sure they're polite and they're empathetic and making sure they don't use too many medical terms that confuse the patient. And it did a very good job. So then we said, well, let's move it over to the physical exam. Then let's move it over. Can it critique me while I put in an intravenous line? Can it critique me while I'm dealing as a team and say you were a good leader or a bad leader? And so all of those tasks are now modules that we're working on, and they basically will streamline. Not only does it mean that the feedback is almost instantaneous, nope, you made a mistake there, you should have done that. But it's absolutely customized to just me. It's absolutely unique to me, and every member in the group gets that coaching. And so in a way, it's a huge advantage. And it means that our faculty, our attendings, they're not wasting time saying, well, I've got to look through this whole video for half an hour while they interview. They can sit back and say, you know what, I've looked and read the report. I think we're all caught up here. Let's talk about some human stuff. Let's talk about how do you break bad news to a patient? There's something that you're never going to get AI to help you with. So it's been very exciting, and huge number of collaborators. That's one of the great joys, as you know, of working here, having been at Harvard where everybody had a fiefdom. This is the exact opposite. You mention the word collaborate or partnership and boom, you're off. And so we have 6 different partnerships related to AI going right now, and we're building some more. And it just makes it super exciting. And I would say every day across my desk comes another proposal. Do you think we could use AI for that? You remember there was a commercial that said, I could have used a VA, could have had a VA. I could have used AI. It was on my t-shirt. And so it's really exciting. And I have to say, coming towards the end of my career, it's really beautiful.
It's such a capstone. I mean, it's transformative, and the stuff you're doing is not only going to benefit our students here across all 6 colleges, but he's too modest to admit this, but a lot of this stuff, these are products that will be used around the world that Allan's developing in his team to really make sure that students have the best opportunity to be the best physicians they can be. So let me, again, janitor, Harvard, Army, Gray's Anatomy. You've been in a lot of different situations.
Horse whisperer.
Whisperer.
I've written 3 books on training horses with the Horseman of the Year.
Oh my gosh. What a Renaissance guy. Okay, so the question is, give us a couple, because as being an English major, I'm sure this stuff is stuck with you, that's along the way you picked up that someone has said, Allan, just remember this, or Allan, this will be a guide for you, that you've thought has really influenced how your views on things, how you views on teaching, education, life, whatever, What are some pithy aphorisms that I always like to ask people, what guides you now?
Well, it just so happens I've been struggling with a lecture on mastery and mastery of surgery. And one of the tidbits that I've been culling out is that you very often as a child have certain skill sets or certain interests that you don't at the time realize are telling you something about where you might be headed. So, for example, I used to make a big deal of sewing the eyes back on my teddy bear. I'd had a tea trolley and I'd wheel him out. But in the 4th grade, I made an entire abdomen and painted all of the organs and put them in and then put a beating heart in it. And I never thought about that I would go in medicine in a million years. But there's things that we're drawn to, that we have talents for, and you want to really think seriously about what are those skill sets and where's my passion? Because that's really the key to a happy life is, be passionate and work on what absolutely makes you thrilled. Yeah. So that'd be my first piece of advice. The second one would be share. By that I mean not only share and collaborate projects and credit and that sort of thing, but I mean also be able to sit down and share that you have a question or you've got a a problem or you're stumped by some bureaucratic thing. But the idea of sharing and feeling close to people is vitally important. And then, the last thing is pay attention to your connections, not only your family connections, but your friends, your colleagues, your workers, and remember that you get out of it what you put into it.
Yep. Wonderful. This was a great off the charts. I think we're going to have to schedule an Allan Hamilton 2.0 after this, but I want to thank you so much for joining us
You bet,
today.
Mike.